the bookshop, it's the bookshop, it's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It is Sam Feifel, your host of the very poorly SEO designed podcast, John Updike's Ghost, your favorite little podcast about reading, writing, literature, bookstores, all things awesome, which we should probably let people know about in the title of our podcast, which we haven't done. But it doesn't matter because I am here with my co-host, the co-owner of the bookshop of Beverly Farms, and all-around great hat wearer, Hannah Harlow. How are you doing, Hannah?
I am wearing a hat today. I don't usually wear a hat, but, I had to go out into the world early this morning. My hair was not looking lovely. So here I am, grateful for our longtime listeners who have discovered us in spite of our poor SEO performing.
I know. We were just having before the recording here, we're having a little analysis of why it is that we can't be like those booktubers on YouTube who have 1.7 million views. And we've decided, A, we are not 24 years old or an attractive female, which is unfortunate.
I mean, speak for yourself.
That's how I was speaking for myself.
Yes.
You
all can give me ratings.
I know,
you don't have to give Sam a rating,
That's
but,
true.
Rate me 5 stars, please.
That's true. And also, we are very poor at telling people what our podcast is about. So we're going to do a better job of that on the internets, which is a very important place to be.
And if you can help us, please go for it. We'd be very grateful.
One little share that's like, be like Rick Johansson. He comments on every YouTube video and he is our biggest super fan, and shout out Rick. And if everybody was a little bit more like Rick Johansson, we would be international podcast stars. So
it's not you're not embarrassing for sharing anything.
No, you just look like you have an impeccable taste. So on our agenda today, I've got 2 books. I'm about halfway through Rebel Girl by Kathleen Hanna, lead singer of Bikini Kill and all-around awesome person. And then I have read Big Time, a novel by Ben Winters, who wrote the very awesome Golden State, which I really enjoyed. What is on your agenda, Hannah?
My agenda includes The Wedding People by Alison Espach, Hum by Helen Phillips, which are 2 upcoming novels coming out in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to give a brief plug to The Night We Lost Him by Laura Dave, who, has a best-selling novel. It's been kind of on and off the bestseller list for the past couple of years. And her new book comes out September 17th that I just read. So, yeah,
do you want to start with that one? Because I've never heard of any of those things you just said out loud. So why don't we just start there? This is your best-selling novel, you say?
Yeah, Laura Dave. So her last book was a Reese Witherspoon pick.
Oh.
And it was one of these books that I just kind of fortuitously happened to read right before it came out and right before it got this Reese pick. And so I felt really smart because everybody was suddenly like, wow.
Yeah.
It's called The Last Thing He Told Me.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I've heard of that. Yeah.
And listen, it's not great literature. It's just a really enjoyable read, where in that book, I was I didn't know, how the mystery was going to be solved. So I was just kind of it was a really easy read, turning the pages, what's the mystery, waiting to figure out what's going to happen. And in that book, for me, you get to the last sentence and the last sentence was just this surprise emotional punch.
Yeah. I got to read the whole thing again, over again.
Really, it was just kind of a emotional thing that I didn't see coming. And
sometimes that annoys me when you get this final piece of context at the end and you're like, what? And you have to read the whole book again, with this different understanding. We
can talk about that when we come to Hum by Helen Phillips. But,
okay. Well, let's not skip ahead. What's this new one called?
So the new Laura Dave is called The Night We Lost Him. It has, they've rebranded her, so it's going to look a lot like her last book. The covers are nearly interchangeable.
Really?
Yeah.
Funny. I would think that's a bad idea. You don't want people to be confused.
No, I think they want people to be like, oh yeah, I really liked that book.
Right.
It looked exactly like this. I don't remember the author's name or the title, but hey, look.
It looks just like, hey, I guess that. I mean,
What did she say about it? I think she writes like a really easy read in like a
Right.
good way. I read this so fast, pages turned, blah, blah, blah. I will say I was sort of hoping for that same, like, are you going to give me that punch at the end? And I will,
didn't
not.
happen.
It just didn't happen. And that's fine. It's still just like a enjoyable mystery or whatever. But I, maybe didn't love it as much as the last one.
Those two titles like intermingle and just slip right through my brain.
Yeah,
the last thing he told me,
right.
and some
The night
other
we
dude
lost
who's
him.
dead.
Yeah.
I guess it just involves dead dudes. That's the theme that we've got going on.
That is the theme.
I know. It's really
first book. I'm sorry. He didn't even die. It's
Oh.
the husband. Turns out in the first book, and she has other novels before this. This is not like that wasn't her debut, but anyway, for the last book, she realizes the man she married is maybe not who she thought he was.
Uh-oh.
Right. So he kind of like disappears, and she's like, what just happened? What did you do? What have you been doing? And so she has to kind of figure out, like, is he a good or a bad dude? And in this new book, yeah.
Well, it's one of those storylines, like, I feel like there are lots of popular storylines for like shows or books or whatever that involve these like massive betrayals or like massive double lives or massive secret lives. And it's one of those storylines, like, have those storylines ever actually happened in real life? Or do they only exist in literature and they're actually not a representation of real life at all? They're just this like fantasy that the, human race has collectively created. Like, has anybody ever led like this double life where like I'm married to this woman and I've got children and I'm the head of the school board, but secretly I am running a drug cartel or whatever,
I've heard stories about people being like, yeah, like turns out my dad had this whole other family that we didn't know about. I have a secret half sister, or like whatever. I think it actually happened.
I guess that,
I don't see how.
Like, I feel like it's in movies a lot, but like it's an actual thing. I don't know. It's one of those things where
listeners can reach out and tell us if they've experienced this in their own lives.
So the new one does not involve double life?
No, the new one is like this woman's dad has died. He was like a billionaire, hotelier, however you say that. And there's a question of like, was he murdered or not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Something about that made me think of feminism and dudes sucking. And
are you talking about I don't know, politics? No, let's not talk about that.
No, but I'm going to start with this Rebel Girl by Kathleen Hanna because it really is. I've only read so Kathleen Hanna, she was really the progenitor, the starter, one of 3 or 4 women, but I think really her who fired up the Riot Girl movement in the actually kind of started in the late 80s, but really early 90s, the sort of parallel to grunge. I always thought of it as being in the Northwest, in Seattle and Olympia, but she actually moves to DC and is like in the DC punk scene when she starts Riot Girl, which I don't know. I always
scene.
What's that?
That was a big scene.
Oh, it's huge. Riot Girl is huge.
Yeah.
So I'm right at the part of the book where she's like 23, 24. It's like 1992. And Riot Girl has just gone crazy. And now all of a sudden, like, there's like Riot Girl outfits in the JCPenney. And she's like, what on earth is happening? Everybody hates her. And I've always known, I read Kathleen Brownstein's, Carol Brownstein. What's her? God dang it.
Carrie
Brownstein. I read her autobiography. She was in L7 or Hole. But
I don't know what she was in early on.
She was in one of the, big Riot Girl bands. So, I've seen like the Riot Girl stuff from the inside before, but Kathleen Hanna like really did start a lot of this shit.
So I was reading on her Wikipedia page before we got on that she came up with the title "Smells Like Teen Spirit."
Yeah, she puts that scene in there. I just saw that. It was like her. So she was hanging around with Kurt Cobain before Kurt Cobain was famous, right? Like they were both in Olympia, they were both in Seattle, they were in like little shitty bands when nobody cared about grunge.
So she was out in the Pacific Northwest. And then moved
that's
to
where
DC.
she started, and then she moved to DC when she actually founded Riot Girl magazine. And she was going back and forth. She was kind of itinerant in general, but so there's this great scene I was going to talk about where she and Kurt are like just they never actually like hooked up or whatever. Kurt was a hardcore feminist and was like one of the safe guys in the scene, which is great. Like Kurt Cobain comes off really well in this book. So does Ian McKay of Minor Threat and Fugazi. Not so much Steve Albini.
That's what I was thinking about for the DC scene.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's this great scene where they're just like hanging out and like smoking a shit ton of weed, and she had just been to like the local CVS where she had like noticed the deodorant that was called Teen Spirit, and they were like just stoned and laughing like, what the fuck does Teen Spirit smell like? And so she wrote "Smells Like Teen Spirit" in Sharpie on his wall, and he actually did call her up later and was like, can I use that for the name of a song? And she didn't think anything of it because they would write stupid songs all the time and didn't realize it would be like the biggest song in the universe. Probably deserves a little but she didn't get it. But anyway, a lot of these musician autobiographies suck. This one is fantastic. She is just crazy fucking smart, talks like really directly. She is a really thoughtful, like intersectional feminist and kind of walks you through her early sort of feminist radicalization, like how she came to understand feminist theory and how she realized that, it was kind of flawed and filled with white women and all kinds of stuff. Again, I'm only halfway through it. I know she comes to a greater realization, but it's super raw. And so she kind of comes out at the beginning and she's like, I didn't want this to just be a list of my traumas. But like she had some awful stuff happen to her over and over again. And I think her point is that it wasn't that rare. And I think like how normal like sort of sexual assault was back in the 70s and 80s, it would blow most people's minds nowadays, just the way that were manhandled and just routinely harassed. This is before most sexual harassment law had really taken hold in the HR departments. She just tells like story after story. Her dad was this drunk shitbag who would like force her to share beds with him, and she was raped multiple times. And they moved to this new town, and her sister was like, loved to party, and so her nickname became Good Times, and then Kathleen's name was Little Good Times, and like just like all kinds of slut shaming. And she ended up going to Evergreen is how she got to Olympia, and like kind of found herself at Evergreen and found other sort of.
What's Evergreen?
Evergreen College. I actually applied there way back in the day. It's like it's an alternative college. I don't know. I'm sure it's just like some $90,000 school for rich people now. But at the time, I think she said she like a semester was like $1,000 or something. And she paid for one of her semesters of college in cash from stripping. She was a stripper multiple times.
Okay.
And then there's just like how she founded Bikini Kill. And she, it's so like, I just don't think the music industry works like this in any way anymore. They just wanted to be in bands so badly because being in bands was cool. And they just like started fucking around with instruments, had zero training, zero knowledge of music. She was playing bass and singing and just like hitting random strings, essentially. Like that's what it would sound like. And just by like force of will, she just wanted to be in a band so bad. They like toured, and their tour was like playing for 20 people in somebody's backyard and then sleeping on the couch. And like, obviously that still happens, but all of a sudden she was Bikini Kill, and she was like opening for L7 in the UK and, you know, having paparazzi all around her. And it was all before the internet. So it all just like took her by surprise. She had no idea that they were popular. And then there was this huge backlash because like, how dare she? She was a man hater. And, you know, she was like one of the first, you know, it's kind of a thing now, but like, you know, she was one of the first people, like she would get up on stage and say, girls in front. I want only girls in front. And because the men would just come up and mosh and like all the women had to stay super far away. Like,
Right.
she tells the story of finding out that men in the hardcore scene referred to women as coat hangers because you just give them your coats and go, you know, mosh or whatever. And so like, you know, she's a real on the ground hardcore feminist and was like punished super hard for it, you know, just for like saying, you know, essentially like women should be allowed to do things. Like it just,
Right.
you know, and I love the way the book is organized too. She's clearly not like, I don't think she worked with, I mean, obviously somebody edited it, but you know, I don't think it's ghostwritten or anything. I think it's her, and it's these. Every chapter is like a page and a half page. You know,
Oh
like
yeah,
these
I
little,
like that.
like these little, you know, 1,500 word to 3,000 word little mini essays, and it's always like this scene. And she's just really great at like, and then this crazy shit happened, and then this crazy shit happened. But it's not all, you know, celebratory. There's a lot of stuff that she clearly regrets doing, a lot of situations she was in where, you know, she knows that she made her own bed. So I just, you know, I think it's just like a really important feminist work. And that's the subtitle is My Life as a Feminist Punk. But
cool. I want to read it now.
Yeah, you should read it. The idea that some of these things are even feminist is insane. You know, like
a pretty low bar.
Yeah, it's like an incredibly low bar. And it's anger inducing, but she is just so like forthright and like just a really powerful, clearly doesn't give a fuck person. It's just so punchy. The writing is so punchy. Like I couldn't put it down.
Oh, I'm excited. That's great. I hope she sells 1 million copies.
I hope she
We'll
does
do our
too.
best to help
it came
her.
out in May, I guess.
Yeah, it was on the bestseller list, at least the indie bestseller list. I think probably New York Times too for like a while, which was awesome. So I'm glad we've finally gotten around to talking about it. And
fantastic.
Yeah. Cool. I'm going to talk about Hum by Helen Phillips next, just because I had mentioned it before. You talked about Last Lines. So Helen Phillips writes speculative fiction, and I have heard people have been telling me that she's great for a while. So she has this new book coming out August 6th called Hum, and I had the ARC. So actually, my husband, Jason, read it first, and he was like, I don't know about this. You know, he started it. He was like, I don't know about this. I don't know if I'm going to finish. And I was like, oh, wow, really? It's not good. Like I thought she was going to be amazing. And so then he ended up finishing it, and he was like, clearly wanted to talk about it. So I was like, I really need to read this. The setup is so good, which is like why I was surprised when he wasn't loving it at the beginning.
What is
the idea is, so you open and this woman, it's kind of a, you know, near future setting.
Yeah, we use speculative fiction now so that we don't say sci-fi so that people don't get scared away, right?
Right, totally.
Yes. It's speculative. It's not science fiction.
Right. So this woman is in the very opening scene having her face altered. So she has lost her job. Her husband is like a gig worker, not making a ton of money. They no longer have her steady income. So she agreed. There's this new company that's like, okay, we can like, we're going to attempt to alter faces so all the face recognition software like won't recognize you anymore.
Yeah.
So she's going to get paid a ton of money to kind of help them like get up and running, like, you know, figure out if this works or whatever. Right. And it's just like a little bit of an alteration. So like, you know, she's not going to look vastly different, but it's enough that like, you know,
the algorithms on the facial recognition, it's all about the distance between your eyes and the triangle with your eyes and your nose. If you move
like
that
when
by like half an inch.
When her kids and her husband look at her, they'll just be kind of like, oh, you look a little weird. Like you still look like yourself, but whatever. Right. So the setup makes me think this is going to be like some badass, like
Minority Report. something
Right.
other.
She's gonna like, you know, because of this new superpower she has, she's gonna like fuck with the system and like bring down the evil corporation or like whatever. So that is not at all what this book is. This book is a like mom novel. It is about being a parent. It is about like, you know, so with all this money she's made, you know, she books this luxury vacation that like, you know, only the ultra wealthy can afford. And it's to go to the botanical gardens where like, it's this, you know, few square blocks in the city where they have, you know, preserved some nature that like her kids have never experienced.
Never
you know,
seen
just
any
like
nature. Yeah.
They don't see any nature. They just, you know, they live in the city and they're like they're middle class or whatever. But so they get to go to the botanical gardens. Everyone's like super pumped. And the botanical gardens are this magical place, whatever. And then you get halfway through the book and something happens in the botanical gardens that like affects her as a parent and like questions her parenting, whatever. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give the book away. But I will just say like, it was just one of those things where the setup makes you think it's going to be a certain kind of book and it is not.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I don't know why people don't do that more often. And I'm trying to think of like a good example. But I think it's really cool when people tell like a normal story in a different universe, you know, like the universe is
that's
different.
What this is.
It's the future or whatever, but then it's just a normal story about family, you know, or like, you know, overcoming adversity or whatever. It doesn't have anything to do with the technology itself, you know?
Right. So, and I will say the book really picked up at the midpoint because then that's like when some action actually comes in. Like I sort of was like, I don't know how much of the first half we actually needed. Like it was like, there were definitely parts where I was like, let's move on with it here.
Well, because if you do it wrong and you're explaining the universe for too long, you've just abandoned the plot for too long and you're not giving anybody reason to keep reading.
Right. And then you get to the end and the last chapter is like, the last line is super confusing. Like Jason and I are still like, we don't actually know what happens. And I feel like I'm actually a pretty good reader and I can usually interpret like what that means. Like if you read closely enough, you can figure it out. And I just went and looked at it this morning and I was like, I'm still not totally sure what this last little bit means for the rest of the novel. But it did make me go back to the first page.
Right.
Because I was like, I think maybe I've forgotten something from the beginning or like, is this what she's trying to say? But it's not totally clear. And so I'm waiting now for more people to read it so I can go on to like, you know, the Goodreads forums and see what people's interpretations
figure
are.
out what people think. Yeah. Wow. I think this can be a good thing. Maybe you do that on purpose to try to get some discussion going about your book, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just bad writing. I don't know. I feel like you should be able to tell what happened.
I feel like you should be able to tell what happened. Like, I feel like this one's like a little too obscure of a like, you know.
Right.
Closing. Yeah.
I don't
know.
I also have a piece of speculative fiction where I know exactly what happens at the end.
Great.
Well, actually, that's a good question. How did they leave it at the end? Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I know how they finished it. Yeah. But so by Ben Winters, like I said, I really liked Golden State, which was like this cool old like noir style California novel in the, you know, Raymond Carver style, but it had this like little conceit about language and you were only allowed to use certain words and like it was like a language police thing, like, you know, which I really liked. It reminded me of like early Jonathan Lethem and that kind of stuff. It was cool. And so I think you got me big time for my birthday.
We did. Right? We gave it to you for your birthday.
Yeah. And it's funny because it says he's the best-selling author of Underground Airlines on the cover of this one, which I haven't read. This one's from 2022. So maybe he hadn't written the California one yet. I don't know. But so in this one, it's So it's the exact opposite of what I was just saying. I liked, like, it is a speculative piece of science fiction, and the whole thing revolves around like this new like technological innovation. And it's not giving it away. Like, the thing is like the book doesn't work unless the thing that you don't know turns out one way, right? So like at the beginning, we have this disoriented person, right? We're following that person around. Why is this person disoriented? Why can't they remember this, that, and the other thing? And then you have this little domestic scene of a woman who works for the FDA approving medical devices. And she has a little they, them 17-year-old, and then mother who's kind of annoying and not a very nice person, but you can tell it's because she's like starting to be disabled and doesn't like the fact that her life is ending or whatever. So you have this little family dynamic of women, again, like written by Ben Winters. I don't know why he made that choice, but whatever. Like, it could have been 3 dudes. Like, I don't know. It just seems like a very look at what I'm going to do type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so this medical device person is called out back to the office. Like, I just can't, the setup also, I can't imagine happening. Like, oh, hey, the police are wondering about, where this medical device came from. I need you to come in the middle of the night and figure this out. I'm like, that's never going to happen. They would just wait till tomorrow. They just use the internet, or like, I don't know, maybe it's like, there's something where like the internet is not quite the way it is now. I don't know. And then, so it turns out she discovers, I found this doctor who has speculated that time is a physical thing that each of us human beings has inside of us, and it can be extracted like blood, right?
Okay.
And so then once you get this little, I discovered this paper, maybe it's real, like it has to be real. Otherwise, the whole point of the book there's no point of the book, right? So
right.
Okay, well, this is what happened then, I guess, And so then the whole thing is like this unraveling of like, how did it happen? And you're like, well, probably that this person just did this thing. And, and then that's exactly what happened. Hey,
Mm.
There was no surprises. I knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
And then B, like he tries to make it like kind of quirky and weird with like these characters. Like there's a character who is, I don't know what, she's like a person who does violent jobs for other people, and she's very attractive and small, but she can kidnap people or whatever. But then she gets like stabbed in the eye, and so like there's just all these scenes of a very attractive woman with an eye patch. Okay, I guess this is add like a surrealism or something, or
right. I don't know. Whenever there's a dude being like, "There's a super hot lady doing violent things," it just feels very.
No, it's exactly that.
For whatever reason, you're like, what a cliche. And I'm like, she's super hot.
A little tight gymnast, beating people up. Yeah. I don't know. It just.
I mean, I think
it's a fine book.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of things where I was like, it just seemed like he was trying really hard, and like.
I think sometimes like there are a lot of these books where you're distracted by all these little things where like you can't withhold your disbelief. Right. Like you're just like you fixate on these little things that really shouldn't matter.
Right.
Because maybe the story is not strong enough.
Yeah. And like, he's good. The pacing is good. I finished it. Like, I never was like, I'm not going to finish this. But it's just like, it feels like there's a whole genre of books where, and this is where speculative fiction does make sense to me, right? The people are just like kind of thinking up, like, what if this, right? And so like this sounds like he was like super stoned. He was like, what if like there was time in your blood, and like what would happen if they extracted some time and you'd disappear for like 3 years and then you'd come back? And that's the whole book, and it's like, okay, like, and it's like he Lego pieced this framework onto that idea, and he's a good enough writer that like it's a book. But the whole time I was like, I don't really care about any of these people. And,
so you're actually, as I was saying that, I'm realizing I felt that way a little bit about my next book. So I was reading The Wedding People by Alison Espach.
Right.
And in the beginning, I was like, this is so dumb. Like, no, this wouldn't happen. And that's like for the first quarter of the book. And then I realized, actually, this is why I love fiction. Like, of course this wouldn't happen, but she is kind of created this brilliant setup that allows these characters to interact with each other in this way that's like actually really freeing.
Yeah.
So I came to really appreciate the book. I think in the beginning, I just like it wasn't clicking for me right away for whatever reason. But I did finally like come to appreciate it and really enjoy it. So The Wedding People, I think I was also caught up in thinking about how am I going to sell this?
Right.
It felt like it's a hard premise to tell people because it's about a woman. Like from the opening pages, she has come to Newport, Rhode Island from St. Louis, Missouri to kill herself. She has hit kind of rock bottom and she's like, all right, well, I've always wanted to go to this fancy hotel in Newport. Like she and her now ex-husband had once kind of decided they were going to go to this hotel and she had spent all this time planning this vacation for them. So she's like, I'm just going to book the most expensive room at this hotel and I'm going to go there for one night. And that night I'm going to kill myself. So like it opens with her arriving. And it's just for me, when I'm thinking about like, okay, how am I going to sell this to a customer who walks in the store? Like you say that to someone and they're like, I don't want to read about someone who's going to kill
themselves. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, but, they have sold millions of copies of the Midnight Library and that's the same thing. There's the woman who, So I'm like, there
are many books that involve someone to kill themselves.
Right. And, very quickly, it's like, she doesn't actually want to kill herself. But anyway, so she arrives at this hotel and it quickly becomes clear that this hotel has been booked for the whole week for a wedding that is going to happen the upcoming weekend. And mistakenly, they've given her one of the rooms.
Allowed her to have one of the rooms. She booked it so early or whatever.
It's supposed to be only wedding people, right? Right. So she's like waiting in line to check in.
Yeah.
And because she is where she is, she's kind of at this like gives no fucks. And so she just says whatever she wants, right? It is very free. Like she's someone who like was used to be a people pleaser and used to like care what people thought about her. And now she's just like, whatever. I don't really care if you think I'm going to ruin your, So like she meets the bride and she's like riding up the elevator with the bride. And the bride's like, what part of the family? Like, are you part of my husband's?
Yeah.
Are you part of my fiance?
We've seen you before.
And right away she's like, no, I'm not part of the wedding. And the bride's like freaking out. And she's like, well, what are you doing here? And she's just like, I'm going to kill myself. And the bride is like, no.
You're not going to kill yourself at my fucking wedding. That's not going to happen. Yeah.
And then the bride starts coming to her because she can like tell this person anything, right?
Right.
He has no relation. Like she doesn't care. Like
my stepmom
doesn't know anybody.
So lame, hate her.
Right. She has no affiliations. And so like the bride starts coming to her. And then like eventually she gets like wrapped up in she is just like, she starts talking to like everybody in the wedding and she's able to kind of see each person for who they are, like kind of extracted from like everybody else's thoughts about them or whatever. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I mean that wouldn't happen, but like that's fine. It's like a sitcom setup. I'm okay with sitcom setups,
And like by the end, what happens? I was like, okay, that would never happen. Right. What happens in the course of a week? You're like, no, but it's okay in this book. I was like, this is, like I said, I feel like as I was reading, I kept thinking, you know what, this is what fiction is for. Like,
I can deal with that.
Right. Yeah.
It just depends on, it's what is the author trying to do? Like, if you're going to provide all these like gritty details about what it's like to work in the drudgery of the Federal Food and Drug Administration, like you're clearly trying to like set this in reality. Right. And so, my suspension of disbelief is way lower because like, I thought this was like a realistic novel. Like, wouldn't it be cool if this was real? Versus like, I'm going to tell a little cartoon story, enjoy it,
Right.
Like you come into it understanding it's a cartoon.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, Wedding People comes out July 30th. And
fantastic.
It's just like a good, ultimately like a appreciation of life. And
I like it.
How to free yourself. Yeah.
All right. That's all of our books today. I want to talk about another book that's about to come out on July 30th. Wow.
Right.
Amazing coincidence that is. I did not know this would come out the same day. And that's the new book from Jessica Anthony called The Most. And I'm excited about this book, but I'm also excited that she is going to join us in the bookshop on August 6th at 6 o'clock. Jessica is a fellow Mainer, super smarty pants. I first really got into her stuff when she released The Convalescent, which is just a really, really weird reimagining of Kafka's, what's the one about where he turns into a bug?
The Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis. Really cool reimagining of the Metamorphosis. Super postmodern and weird. And then I think most people, if they've heard of her, they heard of her most recent novel, Enter the Aardvark, which was about a gay congressman who gets a stuffed aardvark in the mail, I believe. And then this one, the most, is set in like 1950s Maryland about a family who lives at an apartment building with a pool. And this is all in one day where the woman gets into the pool and refuses to get out. So I'm imagining it's a sort of feminist metaphor of some kind.
Yeah, and the book just arrived.
I was about to say, I need a copy of the book to read.
I will bring one to you. It's a very slim book,
right?
And paperback original. So, very accessible. People should pick it up. People should come to the event. And I feel we get to be one of her tour stops.
Thanks she has a cool
Thanks
tour.
To your relationship.
Yeah, well, we're kind of pals. Her husband is a guy named Jonathan Wyman, who has produced both of the last two Grassholes records. And I
didn't realize that.
So we've known each other for a while. And we go way back. Just John has been in the music scene forever, and Jessica has, been right there. But she, like, the two of them are just like this sort of below the radar super power couple. I remember when she released Enter the Aardvark, in the same weekend, she was in the New York Times review of books for Enter the Aardvark, and he was in Billboard magazine for producing the Pretty Reckless's record on the same weekend. I was like, wow, that is some hardcore power coupling right there. Totally. She's a professor at Bates, and she's really there are few people with whom I am actually intimidated to talk about literature with, and she is one of them. She's just like,
sweet. So you are going to be
every time, and I'm going to be in discussion with Jessica. It'll be amazing because she is one of the few people that frequently is like, I don't think that's true. I think you made that shit up. And I'm like, oh.
And you're like, oh, I totally did make that up. Shit. So it's August 6th.
Humiliated, she is the one.
Tuesday, August 6th in the bookshop. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Yeah. 6 o'clock. So that will be exciting. And then also a heads up, don't forget, tax-free weekend, August 10th and 11th in Massachusetts. For one weekend only, it is not Taxachusetts. It is just plain old Massachusetts. You can come into the bookshop. Not only is it tax-free, but also our annual summer sale where 10% off of paperbacks, 20% off of hardcover, and 30% off greeting cards and other ephemera for which we get better margins, and we can offer you 30% off. And that runs all week. We'll start it tax weekend, but it runs that whole following week.
Yes, and you should come in for that whole following week, because remember, if we're offering you these prices, we need to sell twice as much shit. So, you better come in and buy twice as much as you normally would. That would be amazing. You
can help us clear the shelves for all the fall wonderfulness coming in, and all of the holiday stuff I'm starting to order and arrive. So much good stuff.
So much good stuff. All right. So until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.